Hello, I'm Suze Moore, and I hope this finds you well and ready to head with me once again into the exciting world of Nat Walker. Today we're going to begin with Chapter 10 of Crimson Poison, where Nat and her robot dragon Fizz are trapped for a family dinner with her horrible cousin Prissy and her greedy Aunt Vera at their apartment. Chapter 10, Real Family. When Aunt Vera announced that supper was being served, Nat's stomach lurched. She remembered how delighted Prissy had been to share her mother's notebook with Nat, when the cousins had been left alone in the apartment a few weeks earlier. It contained a collection of Aunt Vera's recipes filed in 3 groups. Recipes for the A-list, the B-list and the C-list guests. At the back of the book were the lists of guests. With a wicked smile, Prissy had pointed out that both Nat and Jamuka had a C mark next to their names. As well as the prospect of a terrible meal, Nat also loathed where they had to eat it, in the aquamarine dining room. Everything in it was Aunt Vera's favourite colour. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, the table chairs, even the place settings, all matched. And to top it all, Aunt Vera was wearing an aquamarine dress this evening, and when she took her seat, she blended in so perfectly that her head seemed to float in mid-air. Across the table from Nat sat Prissy. Her scowl had been replaced by another sly look of satisfaction. Her glitter cat trotted over to Nat. When it reached her, the side of its body turned into a small screen. Prissy had animated the photo of Nat so that she appeared to be dancing. Worse still, she'd replaced Nat's legs with pig's trotters. There was a note underneath one of Prissy's inner circle of vile friends. Lol, what a loser, oink oink. Nat felt tears of humiliation welling up. She wished she'd never worn the stupid skirt, and she loathed her cousin. She balled her hands into fists and glared across the table as the cat flicked its tail and trotted back to Prissy. She wished she could send Fizz over with a suitably poisonous message. But he hadn't been upgraded to walk or flick his tail. Sometimes she hated having such an old model of robot. Loser, Prissy mouthed. Ming, the maid, entered carrying a large steaming silver bowl, which she set down in the centre of the table. Nat peeked over the edge to find a pool of tomato sauce. Noodles in yellow chunks of tinned pineapple bobbed on its surface. Hawaiian tropical sardine delight. Again. Grubs up, said Uncle Fergal, rubbing his belly. Nat picked up a noodle with her chopsticks, closed her eyes and swallowed. It tasted like a sweet, slimy worm. The discussion turned to what was happening in Uncle Fergal's banking world. She wondered if this was what normal families talked about around the meal table. In Flapjack Family, her favourite American TV show, they always seemed to be having a great time with lots of jokes and laughter. She wondered if that was how her mother's childhood had been in San Francisco. Here in Hong Kong, it was a very different story. Supper at Wetley Towers was one big fun sponge, soaking up joy in seconds. When Ming brought in bowls of lychee jelly topped with tinned long-life cream, Jamuka excused himself to make an important call. With the school holidays underway, we should take this opportunity for you, Nat, to get more involved with your real family, said Aunt Vera, turning her attention to her. I think it's high time you came to stay with us for a while. Nat gulped. She'd never stayed with them, and she never planned to. What? Said Prissy in horror. Coo, grinned Henry. Jamuka is my real family too, said Nat. Aunt Vera's pursed lips stretched into a thin smile. She reached over, laying her bony hand over Nat's. When Nat tried to slip hers out from underneath, her aunt tightened her grasp. "He's your guardian, yes, but he's not blood, is he?" Nat dropped her spoon. "Come on, Vera, that's a bit strong, isn't it?" said Uncle Fergal. Aunt Vera held up her hand to silence him. "Fergal," she snapped, "Nat's of an age now where she needs female guidance, and it should come from her proper family." "No, I don't," said Nat. Aunt Vera leaned in, close to her ear. "You're fast becoming a young woman, and I can help make you the most of yourself. As heiress to such a large fortune, you need to be groomed before you enter society." Nat swallowed. "I'm fine as I am." Sensing Nat's growing alarm, Fiz's eyes started to flash red. Nat glanced at the doorway. Where was Jamuka when she needed him? "And we're off to Sandman Island," she continued, "so I shouldn't come and stay anyway." Aunt Vera's eyes narrowed. She loosened her grip. "I hadn't been told about that," she sniffed. "Yes," said Nat quickly. "We're leaving the day after tomorrow, after the race at Happy Valley." "Well, we'll have to do it when you return then. It's important that we have some girls' time together," she said with a hideous smile. Nat shuddered. Whatever Aunt Vera had in mind, it was bound to be torture. Chapter 11. The Old Woman. Later that night, Nat was back in the safety of her cabin on the Junco boat. She crossed the rug to a gold-lacquered chest that had belonged to her mother. Lifting the lid, she carefully removed a faded, lemon-yellow kimono. She buried her face in the soft silk and inhaled the faint smell of roses. The years fell away. She was transported back into the safety of her mother's arms. If only she was still alive. If only she was there to offer female guidance, then Aunt Vera wouldn't be sniffing around. Nat unfolded the kimono and wrapped it around her and crawled into bed, waiting for sleep to come. Cocooned in the memory of her mother. Only a few fleeting memories remain, though. Her mother's smile, her laughter, and her touch. "Fiz, play Sailing Movie 5, she said. Beside her on the pillow, Fiz opened his beautiful wings. Instantly, Nat's ears were filled with the sound of ocean waves. A young woman with long blonde hair flying across her face in the breeze grinned into camera. Behind lay a clear blue sky over a white-capped sea. She was bouncing a baby in her arms who squealed in delight. "And how is Miss Walker today?" came a man's voice off camera. "Great," said the woman, "as is our gorgeous girl." She lifted the baby up higher. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, once I caught a fish alive, she sang. The baby giggled. "Wait, I'm coming in," said the man. "Just let me perch Fiz on the wheel." Nat smiled at her dad's thick Scottish accent. The camera pulled back to reveal the deck of the Junco boat. He walked into shot wearing a white t-shirt and blue shorts. His black wraparound sunglasses were propped up on his thick, dark hair. He walked over and scooped up the baby, lifting her even higher. Nat put her hand to the screen, her fingers tracing her mother's face, then her father's, and finally her own. Her parents looked so young and happy. She watched as her mother launched a kite up into the wind, while her father held her, pointing up to where it bobbed and weaved. If only she could climb into the screen. Her eyelids grew heavy. She blinked to try and keep them open, but sleep called, and the nightmare began. She was standing in a clearing in the middle of a forest, barefoot on the snow-covered ground. Giant fir trees formed a wall around her. All around was silent and still. Looking down, she saw that she was wearing her purple kung fu outfit. The cold was intense, turning her body into a block of ice. Suddenly, an ear-piercing scream tore through the air as a crow-like woman in a black cloak flew out from the trees. Nat thought she looked about 100 years old, with her long white hair and leathery brown skin. Panic rose in Nat's throat. She tried to move into a kung fu crouch, ready to do battle, but she was frozen to the spot. As the woman drew closer, brightly patterned red petals began to rain from the sky. The old woman opened her mouth and reached towards Nat with her wrinkled hands. Nat screamed. Chapter 12. Red Petals. Nat woke up on the floor, tangled in her sheet. Fizz was lying at her side, the sailing movie still playing on the screen in a continuous loop. Fizz, stop the movie, she said. He folded in his wings. Time? 3:20 a.m. She groaned, turned on her side and unravelled herself. Her head was spinning. Maybe it was the revenge of the Hawaiian tropical sardine delight. Getting slowly to her feet, she fastened the kimono's belt. Let's head up, she said, picking up Fizz. She climbed to the upper deck and sat down in one of the blue deck chairs. Ah Wong had moved the Junko boat close to the Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club. The mast on top of the white circular clubhouse was twinkling with Christmas lights. Behind it, Causeway Bay's skyscrapers huddled together and their bright lights set against an inky black night sky. Behind them, unseen, lay Happy Valley Racecourse, and there in the cemetery right above it, her parents. Nat closed her eyes, wishing for the millionth time that things were different, that she wasn't an orphan and that her parents were still alive. She loved Jamuka. He was her rock, her sole guardian. He'd been appointed according to her parents' wishes, and she was the only person they had really, really trusted. But he still couldn't fill the black hole left by their absence, and now Aunt Vera was trying to step in. A cloud passed over the moon, accompanied by a cold gust of air that rattled through the Junko's rigging above. Nat hunkered down in a deck chair and stroked Fizz's scaled head. His eyes started to glow bright purple. A pot clattered to the floor in the galley below, making her jump. She peered over the side. Light shone through the porthole. Either Jamuka or Ah Wong was up. You should be in bed, Bao Bao, said Jamuka as Nat walked into the kitchen. It's the middle of the night. I had a nightmare, she said, sitting up on one of the stools at the marble-topped counter. Jamuka was spooning ground coffee into his old-fashioned espresso pot. She spotted the coffee tin and wrinkled her nose. Zoinks! Not the Vietnamese weasel coffee. He smiled and held open the tin towards her. She recoiled, nearly falling off her stool at the foul smell. It helps me think. Don't you want to sleep? Not tonight. I must send good thoughts to Dragon Khan. Can you send some to Aunt Vera too and stop her bothering me? Was that what your nightmare was about? Said Jamuka. He screwed the top onto the espresso pot and twisted the gas knob on the stove. A blue flame shot out, heating the water. No, there was an old woman, like a crow, and red petals. It was raining red petals. Jamuka looked up from the tin. His eyes widened in surprise. His brow creased and he shook his head. What's the matter? She asked. His brow creased. It's nothing. You just prompted an old memory. Hot chocolate? She nodded. Do not concern yourself with Aunt Vera. I will deal with her when we are back from our trip to Sandman. What are your plans tomorrow? I have to be up at the stables by 8. Nat picked out a plum from the fruit bowl that hung from the ceiling. I promised to take Henry to Spin to try out the new Octazeb goggles. Good. Now, since I sense neither of us is tired and there won't be time for practice in the morning, let us fuel ourselves with our drinks and head to the dojo. Nat chugged her hot chocolate, headed down to her cabin and pulled her purple kung fu suit off its peg. Her hand rested for a moment on the black sash, out of her reach until she had mastered the 5-animal style. One day, she said, taking the brown sash instead. She scrunched her hair up into a top knot and ran out of her cabin to the end of the passageway, where a rope ladder led down to the dojo studio. It was still dark outside, but inside the studio was bathed in a soft overhead nightlight. Jamuka was waiting, standing in the middle of the wooden floor, his hands in prayer position. The door slid shut behind her, closing off the square room with paper screens, and Nat took her place opposite him. Empty your mind, he said, bowing his head. She closed her eyes, but the old woman's face instantly appeared. The more she tried to block it out, the more vivid the face became. Warm up, he said. She automatically lifted her arms to hold an imaginary ball, moving through a series of Tai Chi moves, which were as familiar to her as her own breathing. But she couldn't empty her mind of the old woman's face. Position, said Jamuka. She planted her feet hip-width apart. Jamuka gave a faint nod. With a left-arm punch, she aimed at his left shoulder, but he swiftly blocked her path with his forearm. She swiveled from the waist, throwing her right leg up into a high kick. Jamuka blocked her again. She threw another punch, this time with her right arm and then her left in quick succession, but he blocked her each time. Thinking she would surprise him, she sprang up into a double leg kick position, but instead of seeing Jamuka's head in her path, her vision was blocked by a storm of red petals. She landed hard on the mat. Jamuka's hand slid under her armpit to help her up. Is something wrong, Bao Bao? He asked. She blinked. The petals were gone. Red petals. That was all I could see, red petals. Chapter 13. Central Post Office. Nat turned her slider into the south fin entrance of the Spin rocket skyscraper. She passed through the shimmering silver air curtain and entered a sky-soaring glass atrium. Glancing up, she saw that the cafe and shopping level above were already teeming with customers. She pulled into the parking zone and found a free slot. Reminder, parcel from Central Post Office awaiting collection, announced Fizz. After the gaming session, said Nat. A robotic badger bat swooped down, coming to hover in midair. Welcome to Spin, can I help you? Nat held up Fizz. Identify, she said. Fizz's eyes lit up as he swapped data with the badger bat. Welcome, Rain Fox. Your gaming session is due to start in 10 minutes in 6 Alpha, said the badger bat. Thanks, she said, enjoying the anonymity of her gaming handle. No one knew who she really was, except a few Spin employees. If they did, she'd be mobbed. Instead, she was always known as Rain Fox, the name her father had registered for her when she was born. Call from Henry, announced Fizz, retracting his talons from the handlebar. She picked him up. His wings spread and Henry appeared, filling the screen. With his round, freckled face, he was wearing his black slider helmet. "Hi, Henry." "I'm still at Wetley Towers. Prissy's giving me a lift, but she's still freaking out about her hair." Off the screen, she heard Prissy let out a screech. "Don't tell her that, you little snitch." Henry leaned into camera. "She borrowed Mummy's new hair curlers, but it's made her hair all fried and frizzy," he whispered. "Will you go and get me?" Nat had a sudden brainwave. "No, I've got a better idea. Get Prissy to drop you at Central Post Office. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. She cut the call. "Fizz, tell the Badger Bat to rebook our gaming session for 10 o'clock. Fizz's eyes flashed red. Nat turned her slide around and headed out into Central. Nat heard Prissy's approach before she saw her. The boppy beat of the Frou Bunny's girl band came blasting up the post office ramp. Seconds later, a hot pink slider with a glitter finish appeared, its rider in a matching helmet, wearing a pair of shanksy yellow hot pants with a matching jacket. Sitting on the back of the board, strapped into the extender seat, was Henry, red-faced with embarrassment. "He's all yours," said Prissy, pulling up to a hover. She looked Nat up and down, her eyes narrowing with disdain as she took in her blue slider shorts, boots and smart t-shirt. "I see what Mum means. You do look like a boy," she sneered, releasing Henry's seat straps. Kicking her back foot, she booted Henry off the slider. "Ouch!" he cried. Prissy thrust forward her handlebars. Her slider lurched forward and off. "Losers!" she shouted back over her shoulder. "I wish I could trade her in for another sister," moaned Henry, as Prissy disappeared down the ramp. Nat put her hand on his shoulder and steered him towards the glass doors. "Don't worry about her. Let's grab the package I've got to pick up and head it back over to Spin." "Coup dragon," said the woman behind the counter when Nat pointed his snout at the post office check-in screen. "Thanks." The woman smiled. "I've never seen a robot like him before. They're all so big these days." He's vintage. Pay fee, Fizz." Fizz's eyes lit up bright green as he communicated with the screen. Seconds later, a hatch on the wall slid open and a metal robotic arm swung out, depositing the parcel on the counter. It was sealed inside a clear plastic customs inspection bag. "Ah, you're the one this is for," said the woman. "Looks like it should have been delivered a couple of centuries ago. Ha ha." "Zoinks," said Nat, taking it from her. She peeled off the inspected by customs tape and reached inside the bag. "Wow, it looks like it came from a museum," said Henry. Nat gasped at the jar-shaped leather-bound package. Henry let out a low whistle. "Cool, let's open it." "Nope, it's for Jamuka," she said, seeing the address. "Fizz, call him." Fizz beeped, his eyes flashed, and he spread his wings. Jamuka appeared on screen wearing round, mirrored sunglasses. He was down on the racetrack, holding the reins of an enormous chestnut horse. "Dragon Khan looks well," said Nat, noticing the horse's glossy coat. "The vet has declared him back on top form. I see you finally made it to the post office." "It's for you." She held the package up to the screen. Jamuka whipped off his sunglasses. His face turned ashen. "What?" said Nat, looking back down at the parcel. There was a pause before he spoke. When he did, he sounded hoarse, as if the breath had been sucked out of him. Bring it here as fast as you can, Baobao. What's the matter? What's in it? She said. Jamuka levelled his gaze at her. Nat detected something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Her heart started to thump. Just get here as soon as you can. You want us to come to Happy Valley? Yes. But before she could finish, he cut the call. Fizz beeped, folding in his wings. Do you think it's a bomb? Said Henry. Nat felt a pang of guilt. If only she'd picked it up yesterday, if it was that important. Don't think so. I've never seen him look like this before. Let's go. Zula! She turned and headed back towards the lifts. Henry frowned. But what about our trip to Spin? Chapter 14. Happy Valley. Nat turned her slider into the Happy Valley owner's entrance and pulled up to a hover at the gate. A racetrack security guard dressed in a green jacket walked out of the booth. Natalie Walker, here to see Jamuka Borjigan, she said. He looked from her to Henry, who was sitting in the extender seat at the back of the slider. Oh, with Henry Walker, she added. The guard nodded and peeled a numbered red sticker off the sheet and stuck it to her handlebars. You're expected at the Pat Carey stable. Don't stop off anywhere else. You're not really meant to be here, he said. The barrier started to lift. Nat looked up ahead. There were 3 separate lanes. She'd never been allowed in here before. Which one do I take? He pointed to the one on the far left. Level 7. They're expecting you. She pushed the handlebars forward and the slider moved off. A little way along, she turned a sweeping corner to find a tall, round, white building looming up ahead. She drove up the ramp and inside. The lanes split. Ahead stood a set of gates with a black and white sign above saying, Level 1, Delioto Stables. She continued along the right fork and it started to twist up like a helter-skelter. They keep horses in here, said Henry through the headset in her helmet. Yes, it's the new stables, said Nat. It's like Wetley Towers, but for horses. Oh, it'd be cool to live here. By the time she reached level 7, Nat felt dizzy from the climb. She pulled up at the gates and pressed a red buzzer. Moments later, a thin man in rubber boots appeared. Hey, what you kids doing here? You've got to be 18 to be here, he said in a gruff voice. We're here to see Jamuka Borjigan. It's important, said Nat. Someone shouted from behind the gate. Nat couldn't quite hear what they said, but the thin man disappeared back inside and the gate swung open. The smell of sweet hay and warm horses hit Nat's nostrils as she pulled in. She wrinkled her nose. Park here, said the thin man, pointing to a spot between 2 sliders emblazoned with yellow and black stripes and the words Pat Carey Racing. I feel sick, said Henry, removing his safety strap and jumping to the ground. Follow me, said the man, ignoring him. Nat put Fizz on her shoulder, grabbed Henry by the arm and set off after him. They passed through a set of metal doors into the stables. It was a tall, open space with huge paddle fans attached to the ceiling, which were rotating slowly, creating a cool breeze. A central corridor ran the length of the floor. On either side stood a row of loose boxes. The wooden lower doors were all locked with digital key codes. The railings above were painted in black and yellow stripes, making it feel like a giant beehive. A few horses had their heads stuck out over the doors. A grey horse whinnied as they walked past. Nat was so used to robotic animals that she jumped in surprise. Halfway down the row, the thin man disappeared off to the right. "This way," he called. Nat broke into a run, anxious not to lose him. "Hey, wait for me," said Henry, trailing after. She came into a narrow alleyway wide enough for a horse to pass through. It opened out onto an open-air exercise yard high above ground level. Jamaica stood talking to a white-haired man wearing a black polo shirt and jodhpurs. They were watching Dragon Khan being walked around on a long rein by a stable hand. "Swift like a bird, not slow like a tortoise, Bow Bow," said Jamaica, seeing her. We came as fast as we could," said Nat. "Natalie Walker, Henry Walker, this is Pat Carey," said Jamaica. The white-haired man smiled and nodded towards them. "Pleasure to meet you both," he said in a thick Irish accent. They shook hands and Nat reached into her backpack and pulled out the package. "Here," she said, handing it over. Jamaica's hand shook as he took it from her. "Can I have the stamps for my collection, please?" said Henry. "Not now, Henry. Stay with Mr. Carey. Bow Bow, come with me." Jamaica led Nat to a shaded viewing area. "Take a seat," he said, sitting down on one of the chairs. "What's in it?" she asked, watching him carefully turn the package in his long fingers. There was a soft cracking sound as he broke the blue wax seal on the base. He pulled the leather packaging off to reveal a silver jar stamped with star shapes. He unscrewed the lid and extracted a piece of damp grey cloth. His fingers trembled as he peeled it open. Inside lay a large red petal. It was divided into two shades of red, one very dark, almost black, and the other a bright scarlet. And in the middle it was separated by a jagged electric blue line. On the inside of the cloth, bold words had been written in black ink. Jamaica narrowed his eyes as he scanned them, his brow furrowed with deep lines. He took a sharp intake of breath, slipped off the chair, and fell to his knees. The end of chapter 14. What does it mean in the mysterious jar? We shall find out tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you again soon. And also, if you do want to contact me at all, you can find me, beautifully written by hand, here we are, susanmooreauthor.com, and you can send me email to susan@susanmooreauthor.com. Thank you.